most people get I think absorbed to which type of technology are we talking about, right, for the need, and not about how technology will enable us really to, I think, create that impact towards society, towards, I think, the stakeholders. So what I would, encourage the community is to really start demystifying, right, many pieces of, the puzzle. Like, what does, data mean to the chief financial officer? Right? How easy or how important is it for the CFO to be able to really understand how data is not a cost, but it is an asset that helps them monetize and create revenue.
Hello and welcome for today's episode, where we'll be discussing the future of data, artificial intelligence, and the growing role of CDO and CAIO roles in Cyprus. I'm delighted to have amazing audience here. I have Mr. Demetris, Chief Scientist of Cyprus. I also have Ingrid, Chief Data Officer at Cablenet. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deepak. Thank you for having us.
So this is addendum to the first conversation which we had. Now, for the next 25 to 30 minutes, we are going to discuss what is this role, two roles done globally, and what we can do here in the field of government, corporates, and how do we use these two roles for the betterment of Cyprus. Having said that, I wanted to ask Chief the first question, where Cyprus has moved two steps up to the 25th rank in Global Innovation Index. This is getting fueled by innovations in fintech, cybersecurity, and I'm sure a lot of good things are getting done. I wanted to ask you, what is Cyprus doing to accelerate all this and its digital readiness?
So thank you very much. I think, Deepak, let me just say that at the core of the transformation of the digital journey of Cyprus is the Deputy Ministry of Research and Digital Innovation. And there are essential platforms, or let's say blocks, like the digital strategy, the research and innovation strategy, and at the same time also the AI strategy that was developed from 2020 to 2025. Now we are at the element where we're revising the 2025 to 2030 strategy, but the most important part is that Cyprus has really played a role in working with European counterparts, leveraging, I would say, programs that are available to build the necessary infrastructures that help. So centers of excellence that are really helping, spiral, or let's say fast track innovation. We also have a Digin, which is a digital innovation hub that is actually supported by both SME companies and also, let's say, research organizations, centers of excellence. We have initiatives in place that are really, upgrading the economy from a digital upgrade plan that are coming in from the Ministry of Energy and Commerce. And all of these different programs are going into one direction. Now, what we're doing, right, is we're really betting a lot, putting a lot of emphasis on our revised strategy for AI, which is going to really accelerate and give a push to both public sector and private sector. And for that to happen, right, we need to uplift our digital skills. We also need to uplift our competencies and capabilities when it comes to digital. Our Human Resource Development Authority is already driving and subsidizing, I would say, courses and workshops that are supporting people to learn, let's say, Microsoft Azure fundamentals or other competing platforms. There is a heavy emphasis on really, helping people adopt Gen AI, and the government has made fundamental progress in really modernizing the digital government framework, right, and the digital services, which are now accessed by citizens across, a digital assistant and a digital citizen, let's say, experience. So we are preparing and we're making sure that everybody in the economy, all stakeholders, all units basically are on the same page to move forward. And I think in the next 3 to 5 years, what we will be seeing is rapid transformation from the ecosystem.
Awesome. Thank you, Chief, for that answer. And so basically, it's a mix of top down policies which are getting done by the government, and then there's a bottom up innovation which is flowing in. I wanted to now move to you, Ingrid. You being the CDO of Cablenet, what are the signals you are seeing from the market?
What we see from our end is a surge in data and an increased interaction from our customers with the digital channels, which effectively means even more data, right? So the expectations are higher now, and it's about a mindset shift also. So it's not only about storing all this data, but also about how do we drive business decisions using this data to make both our internal processes more efficient, but also our customer journeys the best they could possibly be. Over and above, we're also seeing use cases for AI, which drives more personalization to our customers, more efficiency in our processes. So all of this is the signs, the signals which we are seeing from the market.
Deepak, I think you have actually had a variety of roles internationally, of which you've played the role of the chief digital officer, at least in two very big organizations. How is the role of the chief digital officer different to the role of the chief technical officer, the CTO?
That's a very good question, Chief. Uh, Traditionally, the CTO, technical officer, was there to take care of and produce assets in form of technology as well as infrastructure. This continued till around 1980s or so, when the contents which are there in technology assets, which is the data, also started becoming important, and especially by around 1990 and 2000, when there was exchange of information for doing business with the advent of internet. The quality of that data exchange happening between organizations caused the data to be in good quality. That's where the focus on a CDO kind of role begin as the first place. Think of it, if I have to give an analogy, a CTO will create a refrigeration box. So the temperature will be maintained, the engine will work, it will look and function. But the contents which are going inside the refrigeration, what are the parts, what are the materials you are putting, having a clue of what is inside help you build commercial applications. So the quality, if you know what is inside and you know the forecast of how the consumption which by people going to the refrigerator and consuming it is known, then you can build intelligence systems. So first, knowing what is in inside, knowing the quality of data capture, knowing the in and out which is happening and capturing it efficiently, and then taking some strategic decisions which will make the user experience better. This all becomes in the gambit of a CTO. So, to sum it up, a CTO will try to create an app or a screen and create some functionality. But the data which gets produced out of that screen, the content of that software container, is where the role of CDO and now recently the CAIO becomes very important.
So, why is now a good time to clarify the responsibility between Chief Digital Officer and Chief AI Officer, right? So, I understand from what you've just said, the difference between the CTO and the CDO.
Yeah.
But how do you view the difference between the CTO, the CDO, and the CAIO?
That's another very interesting question, Chief. Now the CAIO will be relying on the data quality, so that when they are creating automation and intelligence, because the application will, there has to be a specific focus for making the whole application more intelligent, working with various cross-functional teams. So the CDO's responsibility in today's age is more to ensure that the quality of data, the capture of data, and the transformation is managed. But the actions which are needed on that quality of data which is there to increase the productivity, to increase the efficiency, to increase business levers, if there is a dedicated chief AI officer existing in the company, then the returns on investment becomes multifold. Point in case here being the chief AI officer will know the capabilities of scientists who can create models. The chief AI officer will also know the expertise of data analysts who are crunching numbers, looking into what are the opportunities, etc. So the CAIO role is actually a blend of engagement as well as technology. And these two things together make this role laser sharp. So if an organization today has to get superior results, then they don't have to stop at CDO. They need to create another specialized role of CAIO who is focused, laser sharp focus on the intelligence which is coming out and make the app or website more intelligent.
Thank you very much, Deepak. So, Ingrid, over to you. What, in your view, from your experience, is the difference between the CTO, the Chief Digital Officer, and the Chief AI Officer?
So I think that Deepak described it very, very perfectly. So the CTO is more focused on technology and leveraging new technologies and setting the strategy and the vision for adopting these new technologies. The CDO is more focused on the transformation of all the data generated to drive business value. And then the CAIO comes and accelerates the driving of business value through all these AI use cases and more ML ops and applying all these algorithms from an AI point of view. Plus, also, the CAIO is responsible for making sure that AI is ethically implemented and that, of course, there's the right governance and compliance to make sure that it is used, the technology is used securely and safely. So, having said that, although they all have sort of a very clear distinction, I do also see an overlap because ultimately it's the data which is important for all the three roles, and all three roles need data to drive the next decision making in any business. So they're separate, but they're also converging at the data point. And what is interesting also is that in smaller economies where we have a strong SME culture, it's also interesting to see how and if these roles could also converge into one role and what would that role be.
Okay. So, Deepak, back to you, right?
Yeah.
Can you outline, right, how these roles have shifted internationally?
Yes, Chief. So if I look at more from a CDO perspective and CAIO, I'll focus around. So for a CDO perspective, as I mentioned, somewhere around 1980s or so, when the role got a recognition, it was more of capturing the quality of data, governance of data, more like a data quality part of it. Some of the organizations which adopted it earlier, like say for example Toyota and GE, they came up with concepts like Six Sigma and other standards. This directly impacted the balance sheet of the organizations. But then it was not a widespread thing. But by around 2000, with the boom of internet, organizations started exchanging information. So the data governance, the data maintenance, the data management became prominent. People started realizing, as I was mentioning, data as an asset by around year 2000 or so. And then and then when it was an asset, privacy of data, customer ID, there were like hackers who were trying to break systems. There were like governments which were coming up with regulations. And I think the biggest jump which that came in the role of CDO was with the compliances like GDPR. So when GDPR came into existence, all of a sudden, all businesses understood that if we do not secure the data, make the personal data, secure, there will be huge penalties. So even at that point of time, those organizations which were not serious on having a chief data officer, they started creating roles for it to avoid those penalties. Also, with the evolution of uh, risk framework, what we have seen is in businesses, more and more there were some fraud cases, etc., which were detected. And there now the CDO of the company is targeted to ensure that the data is validated. There are checks and balances in the system. Say, for example, if a bank, just to give an example, has to lend money, there has to be a certain ratio of good debt, bad debt, which needs to be kept. Now, this responsibility lies today with the role of a CDO to ensure and flag signals. And the last part now, which is happening, is with all this information which the CDO is tied up, the next big leap or the next big bet the world is going to take is with this tons of good data which a CDO has generated, what are the insights? What are the action a particular company in Cyprus or internationally need to take so that we make actionable outcomes for the company? Think of it. We are not just talking about chat GPT, etc., in terms of AI. We are looking into repeatable trends and taking some actions based on that. So CDO is there to create data as an asset, but a CAIO is responsible to create actions and outcomes in terms of efficiency and income for the company. That's how I see the evolution of these three roles happening.
So if I summarize basically what I hear, we're talking about, I think, maybe three waves. I would outline them as a chief digital officer wave one, where you would focus initially on governance, on privacy, on quality, then move into an evolution of, I think, insights for growth. And then looking at the third step right now, where we're basically having an expectation from an organization or a function or a leader to enable the data for it to be used in an AI ready world, especially where we have, for example, a new role like the chief AI officer who owns a portfolio, right? That is more about, the strategy of the models, the life cycle, the MLOps, the ethics, right? And, I think both have different, scopes and also shared goals. But Ingrid, I'm very, very curious about your view. What's your view on the topic, on the evolution of these roles?
Yeah, so I completely agree to what you both said. We did start, in fact, with compliance and GDPR, and this has now pretty much become privacy by design, right? Compliance by design. So in whatever we do, it is embedded into the way we think. So now we are seeing, and in my daily role, I do find myself working more on, okay, how do I use this data to drive better customer experience, to influence the next product we need to launch, to influence what is the next technology we should be investing in, retention, how do we drive more revenue. So as you both are saying, the role of the CDO, in fact, has truly evolved. And the way I see it is that the CAIO will accelerate this role even more by driving more business growth more rapidly.
So how do the responsibilities split between the chief digital officer and the chief AI officer, Ingrid?
Mm-hmm. So the CDO is the person who is responsible to make the organization more data-driven, right? To mention governance, quality, compliance, analytics. So this is all the responsibility of the CDO. Whereas the CAIO is the person who's owning the strategy. So getting that data and building use cases, selecting which models to use, thinking about ethics, regulatory frameworks. But of course, they both work together. So one is laying the foundation, that's the CDO. The CAIO is building responsibly on top of that.
Deepak, anything you'd like to comment on this?
No, I agree with her. And I think right now, when I see CAIO is a very important role, some companies do not have that role differently than CDO. I strongly recommend companies to have a specific CAIO role for the benefit of the drives which we mentioned about here.
In fact, that brings me to a question for you, Demetris. So what does this mean for Cyprus, especially in an economy of SMEs? How can these roles converge?
Well, first of all, let me say that there's implications, right? I mean, when you think about competitiveness, you have to think about trust, you have to think about talent, and you also have to understand that in a small country, right, depending on the size, SMEs are not large organizations that have these, I think, endless pool of resources to be able to staff and build all of these teams. However, I think that with the right training and the right, let's say, tailored acceleration plans, that building two teams to function as chief digital officers and also chief AI officers can actually make progress for the nation. So I'm saying that we're an economy that have 98% plus, right, of SMEs. Now the challenge for us is that for us to grow these companies, these SMEs, we will look outside Cyprus, right? Because I mean, the actual size or the actual volume of the Cypriot market is fixed, it's finite. Scaling, right, to millions and hundreds of millions of customers as an opportunity is the opportunity that's there. So I think that for us in Cyprus, and especially for the SMEs, it's for them to rethink about their business model, for them to really think about how they scale their solutions to be able to move forward, and to do that without compromising, I would say, the obligations to legislation, to the frameworks, to, for example, guidelines that are there. So I think that's the balance that we need to build, and I think that. For very small organizations, maybe there could be a hybrid role that ties in, the obligation of, the chief digital officer focusing more on how do we monetize the data, and then also building selective, let's say, types of models. But I think that as we move forward, and I'm very proud to see that we're having many large organizations that provide managed services come to Cyprus. It's not going to be long until we also see an evolution of a CDO or a CXO as a service, where people and smaller SMEs could eventually, I think, work together and cooperate in really building the necessary capabilities. Now, Ingrid, going back, right, from your experience, what's the hardest part of your job as a chief digital officer, right? Data governance or managing data monetization?
I would say both, both in different measures. So data governance, of course, is important. As Deepak mentioned earlier, there are hefty fines if any data is compromised. So it's a big responsibility. I think we have managed to get into a mindset of building compliance by design, privacy by design. But of course, now we're on the verge of also the EU AI Act and ethical AI and all of this discussion. So that brings another big discussion to the table. Whereas with data monetization, I think creativity is the challenge, right? So how do we, looking at the data, how do we translate this into business value, both for the customer? How do we simplify further the customer's journeys? How do we create more value for the customer? How do we make it seamless for customer to engage with our services? But also for the businesses in terms of process automation, simplification, how do we empower our workforce to give the best possible experience to customers? So there, the limit is more the creativity part and sitting and observing the customer to see what the customer needs to be able to provide the best value. So both are challenging in a different perspective, I would
Yes,
say.
yes, and I think I mean, I recall looking at the model, right, or a specific course from MIT where they were talking about data monetization as either using data to optimize processes or using data for actionable analytics or really selling the data. And I think that in some small organizations, maybe a hybrid function between a chief AI officer and a chief digital officer may be able to handle that. But that brings me, I think, to that. I think international or global experience. Deepak, you've been in the role of a CDO in large organizations, including UBS, BP, and also Angel One in India, right? Why do you feel that it is time now for I think the Cypriot ecosystem to really invest on building more focus on chief digital officers and chief AI officers?
Uh, from my experience, I will say that some of these organizations, though they are big, they delayed making a decision of having a dedicated CDO and a CAIO, and that caused a lot of lost opportunities. So if we have to, because we are starting and with your under your vision, There's a huge focus coming on uh, creating communities. So having a CAIO role, which will be cross collaborative role, just not a technical role. As I mentioned, it's an influencer across the, say for example, a CAIO role will work with a chief growth officer, chief revenue officer to use AI to multiply the revenues and get good customers, which a CDO was not able to influence. So, if there are two roles, CDO can continue to get the clean data assets for the company, and CAIO will work with cross collaboration to create outcomes for the company. So, it's a good time to have these two dedicated roles identified and funded.
Thanks. So I think for our audience, it's important, to understand that these roles are important because there is a lot of, data fragmentation and a lot of, I think quality that needs to be addressed, which I would call, the quality depth. I think, fixing that right really requires an ongoing effort. I think, analytics without action, right? How do you fix tie dashboards to these decisions, and how do you really reimagine the type of insight that the CXO, let's say, team will require for them to be able to make decisions that are fast. I think then we need to understand that we are slightly behind in terms of our digital journey. So thinking about those talent gaps and how we close them up, right, and how we build the necessary, let's say, I think capacities there. How do we really think about avoiding those misaligned initiatives, right, and basically looking at the reference architectures, the portability of data. How do we really make sure that we optimize and design for scale? But I think, Ingrid, you've also been, and you are a chief digital officer, right? And you're working in a very dynamic environment, I think, in the telco industry, where I think there is a lot of customer churning, and there is always, that pressure to really think about that customer lifetime value and what you add, right? What would you like to add from your experience, with regards to why do we need both roles in Cyprus, right, and how we build them?
No, I think it's important because other challenges which we face is also an underpowered mandate, right? So it is important that these two roles have the proper executive sponsorship, and also working not only in silos, of course, but across the organization to build value and understand really the business and what that means for the business.
Thank you very much.
So, do you believe that building a CDO and CAIO community will accelerate Cyprus digital and AI posture?
I sure do. I mean, let me just say that Cyprus is an island that is also known for being the number two in gaming in Europe. Right, is known for being amongst the number 10, let's say, shipping and maritime communities, and ship management is really growing very fast. Number 25 on the Global Innovation Index, and the amount of technology that is being adopted in both the financial services, within banks, within insurance companies, within, I think, shipping, and all of this is really moving forward. Bringing to life such a community will accelerate the amount of professionals that are investing professionally in this area, that will help us not just build in an ad hoc manner with lack of best practices, right, the next era. It will actually help us future proof what we need to think about from a regulation perspective, from a data governance perspective, from a risk perspective, an analytical insight or an insight perspective that will help us make more decisions. The world has moved to just looking at reporting to really using data for evidence policy making. And I think that's a signal that we need to make sure that every one organization in Cyprus, SMEs, enterprises, right, have the capability to be, I think, advocates of growth, of supercharged growth. And I think that starts by building the necessary, I think, talent. And I think there's no better place than really focusing on building, chief digital officers and chief AI officers.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm very fortunate and feel privileged to be part of this group. And thanks for including me, Chief. This means a lot. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Ingrid?
Yes, I like the last comment which you made about not building ad hoc and having a structure and a proper mechanism to build towards this. I feel that every company today, even companies not directly in technology, should be data-driven businesses. So this is even more important to have investment in developing these kind of roles for the industry.
Thank you very much. And I think, I would like to close by saying that, most people get, I think, absorbed as to which type of technology are we talking about, right, for the need, and not about how technology will enable us really to, I think, create that impact towards society, towards, I think, the stakeholders. So what I would, encourage the community is to really start demystifying, right, many pieces of, the puzzle. Like, what does, data mean to the chief financial officer? Right? How easy or how important is it for the CFO to be able to really understand how data is not a cost, but it is an asset that helps them monetize and create revenues. Likewise, right? How important, for example, the understanding of data is for the communication and the interaction of the cross CXO team for them to create value. So I think there are many topics that still need to be demystified, and I'm happy to see that the community is going to be actually taking up and rolling the sleeves and really building the necessary capacity. So without further ado, I think I'd like to thank you also for hosting us here today. I think I would like to thank Euclan for hosting the Fearless Future community event, and I look forward to seeing right as an audience more of these sessions and really getting some learning, because I'm really confused, right? Is it a data mesh, a data warehouse, a data lake? What's the best structure that I need to think about when looking at the architecture of some of our systems? So thank you very much, and looking forward to seeing more sessions soon.